Hi everyone, it's Judy. As we embark on our unit on media strategy, we need to talk about right sizing our strategic objectives to our resources. So, what are the 5 key takeaways I want to share with you today? It's really important to ask yourselves whether the budget that you have to work with fits the challenge. Because if you have lofty challenges and limited budgets, your strategy simply isn't going to work. Now, how do we go about figuring out whether we do have the right resources for the challenge? We're going to talk about how to do this when your strategy is acquisition, and I'm going to introduce you to the ATR model that stands for awareness, trial, and repeat. But we also need to look at it when your strategy is retention, and we're going to use the concepts of purchase cycles and effective frequency. Our fourth key takeaway is that whether or not you have the right resources is going to be heavily influenced by marketplace factors to see how far your money will go during periods of media inflation, and also how competitive noise is going to influence your ability to break through. And then finally, I want to share with you that unfortunately, oftentimes fewer resources leads to more creative solutions. So let's get started. How can you spot lofty challenges and limited budgets? Well, I'm here to share with you that over time, this will become intuitive, I promise you. The more experience you have, the easier it will become to spot when you've got greater challenges relative to the resources that you have available to you. Now, I'm going to share with you tools that you can use to help determine whether or not you are under-resourced. And you may be stopping me and go, wait a minute, Judy, this feels counterintuitive to the IMC budgeting process because you've advocated, throughout both media foundations and in this class, that we need to solve the problem first and then budget at the end. Well, that's true, but if you have a sense of estimates of how far your resources will actually go, this is going to help you to level set up front, because the last thing you want to do is overpromise and underdeliver. So how can you go about doing this? Well, having some history on your brand is going to help. So over time, you'll have a sense of your brand's marketing spending. You know what the objectives were behind those various periods of spending and what the outcome was. So very quickly, you'll be able to pressure test your spending relative to historical benchmarks, your objectives relative to historical benchmarks, and then also you'll be able to go back and look in time to just see how successful you were. Because clearly, if you weren't successful at achieving an objective, you can't really expect to all of a sudden be successful without changing something, right? The same thing goes with understanding the competitive context, looking at category history, determining spending in the category per market share point. This is going to help you to see whether or not your budget is within range. Now, if you're trying to reach new users, you can use the ATR model and the associated costs to deliver on that model. If you're trying to retain your current users, you can model the purchase cycles and look at the costs to achieve effective frequency across those purchase cycles. But again, knowing what's happening in the marketplace, are media costs significantly on the rise? And is competitive activity significantly on the rise? This is going to influence how far your money is going to go. But then last but not least, I'm going to encourage you to think outside of the box. How can you create value with less resources? And I'm going to give you a great example of this at the end of lecture. So let's get started. Let's say that you are trying to grow your business, acquire new target audiences. Well, let me introduce you to the ATR model. The ATR model stands for awareness, trial, and repeat. So when you are trying to reach new customers, usually you do a significant battery of consumer testing before you attempt to do it. It's usually called concept testing, where you take a customer group that you're interested in acquiring and you share with them everything about the product or service and how it fits into their lives and how it will solve their problems. And through this approach of concept testing, you ask all kinds of questions about how appealing is the product or service. And if consumers are willing to try it, then you usually give them an opportunity to try, and then you follow up with them and ask, based upon their experience, would they convert and would they buy it again? So, walking through this, in order for an ATR model to work, you need to determine how many people you need to make aware of your product or service. Now, from a media strategy standpoint, this is actually the last number that you calculate, but I'm going to walk you through this and then help you to understand how it works from a media strategy planning standpoint. From your concept testing, you already know the percentage of people who become aware who would be incited to try the product. So for example, I might become aware of a new skincare product for mature skin. And based upon it, I might go, you know what? That looks really interesting to me. I think I'm going to try it. Or I might look at it and go, that looks interesting to me, but you know what? I'm pretty happy with what I'm using. I'm not going to try it. So before products go to market, usually marketers are going to concept test and determine they're only going to take products and services to market or new campaigns to market that incite high conversion rates from awareness to trial. It doesn't make sense to implement a program where you're spending a lot of time and resources and hard paid media money to generate awareness to have significant fall off in your trial rates. Okay, so let's say that I try this new skincare product. I'm like, you know what? Yeah, I'm up for it. And I try it, and based upon the product's performance, I like it. And I'm like, you know what? This is great. I'm going to put it into my product repertoire. Well, guess what? Not everyone who tries something is going to convert. So you're going to have fall off there. That's just natural. But of those who convert, then you can look and say, okay, if I can convert Judy to use a skincare product, how many purchases in my fiscal year can I count on from Judy? And based upon the purchase cycle length for the product, we can calculate that. When you add this all up together, you arrive at your total volume. Okay, so this is what marketers do when they look at either launching a new product or moving into a new consumer target with an existing product. They do all of this concept testing for ATR up in advance. So how do the media strategists deal with this? Well, they will get a volume goal for the year. Okay, so we want to enter this new target market. We want to start talking to mature women who, due to the process of aging, have very specific skin needs, and we want to sell 2 million units by the end of the year. Well, if you have the data from the concept testing, you can literally say, okay, what is my reach goal to make sure that I am reaching enough people like Judy so that when the percentage of those reached try, and when the percentage of those who try convert, And when those who convert actually repeat throughout the year, I hit my volume targets. Now, in order to determine if you have enough budget, you need to ask yourself another critical question, which is, do I need to rely solely upon paid media to pull this off? Or can I rely on owned, earned, and potentially shared channels to help deliver the burden? Now, we can do the same thing for retention targets using purchase cycles and effective frequency. So let's say that I am going to grow my business in the coming year by making sure that I retain my existing users and I try to get additional purchase occasions from them. And I have budgetary resources to support this objective. Well, the first thing we have to do is we have to determine the length of the purchase cycle. And you all probably know this already. A purchase cycle is defined as the interval between product purchase and its replenishment. Now, the length of a purchase cycle is going to be affected by whether or not someone is a heavy, medium, or light user. So if I fall in love with the skincare product and I want to apply it both in the morning when I wake up and before I go to bed, I am going to have a much greater purchase frequency than if I fall in love with the product, but I only want to use the product at bedtime. My usage frequency will be cut in half. Sometimes seasonality will affect purchase cycle intervals as well, and you can't drive incremental purchases in a season that's not relevant. Now, in order for media to support this, and you'll remember this from media foundations, you need to apply recency theory. And it's the idea that it's our job as marketers to remind the consumer to replenish their product as close to the empty shelf as possible. So the question becomes, what level of marketing frequency serves as an effective reminder? And as we introduced you in Media Foundations, it's important to use frequency caps to make sure that we avoid excessive exposures. It leads to wear out, but it's also a waste of resources. So when you put these two ideas together, you can then ask the fundamental question, what are the resources that I need to pull this off? And it's influenced by the degree to which retention and purchase frequency can be managed on owned media channels. So the extent to which we have to go outside of our owned media ecosystem to give the consumer the nudge, it's going to cost me more money. Now, as I mentioned before, marketplace factors, whether we're talking about spending for acquisition or spending for retention, marketplace factors are going to significantly influence how far your resources will go. And there are two key marketplace factors I want you to consider. The first being competitive noise, and we've talked about this already. You need to know what you're up against without getting into a share of voice battle. But understanding absolute spending in the category relative to market share, and also where the competitive pressure is coming from across the paid, owned, earned, and shared ecosystem. You also need to look at competitive brand sponsorships, because when competitors are sponsoring certain media that's highly influential, chances are they've negotiated competitive separation and you might not even be able to access what you want. So you need to keep that in mind. The other key marketplace factor is media inflation. So during periods of high overall marketplace inflation, it's going to cost you more money to deliver on your objectives. But you also have to recognize that inflation isn't always uniform. There will be times where demand pressure on certain consumer segments will make certain pockets of the media ecosystem much more expensive than other pockets. So these are all things you need to factor in and discuss with your financial team to help you determine whether or not you have enough resources. Now, finally, sometimes the fewer the resources you have, the more creative your solutions will become. And it's really interesting because once you demonstrate to your team that you can't win on traditional exposure metrics, you can begin to shift toward more meaningful measures. It's just the wild truth. And I learned this years ago on Lego with Revenge of the Brick. I encourage you to go into Google when you have a moment and type in Revenge of the Brick. You will discover a 5-minute and 27-second video that is just amazing. It's a mini movie that we launched to support Lego's product line during episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. So let me walk you through a little bit of the case. Lego at the time had enjoyed considerable sales success from its Star Wars license agreement. Star Wars was highly important to both the core Lego enthusiasts as well as Star Wars enthusiasts. Now, I'm going to rewind you all the way back 20 years, and just so you know, this experience that's now 20 years old is as relevant today as it was back then. So, Star Wars is getting ready to release episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, and there was all kinds of marketplace excitement, but that excitement translated into a ton of competitive noise out in the marketplace. The stakes were incredibly high, not only for Lego, but for, frankly, all license holders. Retailers were scrutinizing every license holder's marketing plans to make sure that we were doing everything possible. And as you know, in brick and mortar, there is only so much room for in-store features and display. Who would get it? At the time, Lego's primary competitor, Hasbro, who also holds the Star Wars license, was aggressively touting that they were going to be spending big money in paid media. And because Hasbro is publicly traded, they were talking about this loudly on Wall Street. So it left us with a significant hurdle. How in the world could Lego possibly compete? How can we ensure sustainable success outside of the movie spike while getting greater than our fair share of movie noise and halo? We knew we were going to be significantly outspent by our Star Wars competitors. So how could we possibly break through? Well, the answer was discovered with media consumption insight. So the process that you've gone through is the process that my team at Starcom went through. We studied Lego Star Wars enthusiasts and we entered into chat rooms and did social listening. And I can tell you that social listening 20 years ago looked very different than it does today, but the outcome was still the same. And what we discovered was fascinating. Lego Star Wars enthusiasts could care less about the toys. All they cared about was how Lucas was going to end the story. So guess what? That became our solution. Give the fans exactly what they want. Give them a story. So we pitched this idea to Lego. Lego then in turn pitched it to Lucas. At the time, Lucas was independently owned. They weren't part of Disney yet. And everyone fell in love with the idea. They fell in love with the idea to the point that Lucasfilms actually wrote the script for Revenge of the Brick. So what did we do? We took all of our resources and instead of spending it on paid media, we took the resources, shifted them into production, and we created a 5-minute, 27-second mini film that we then had, and we used it as a piece of content. And we put Cartoon Network up against Nickelodeon in a bidding war to see which of the kids' networks, because keep in mind, 20 years ago, kids still watched a ton of television versus spending all their time on YouTube like they do today. And Cartoon Network actually won the bid, and they treated it like the launch of a movie, and we didn't have to pay a penny in paid media to pull this off. So, how did we design the media allocation strategy? Well, we followed the narrative arc of a movie launch. So you guys know that we have 3 different media design approaches. We can either follow a day in the life of our customers, we can follow the customer journey that they take to purchase toys, or we can follow the narrative arc of a story. And here, that's what we did. So when you launch a movie, you've got 3 key phases. You promote the movie in advance to get people excited. Then you hype the premiere, the red carpet, where finally the anticipation's over and we finally launch the movie. And then you drive the aftermarket. So literally, the media strategy wrote itself. Now, here's the cool thing. In order to sell in this strategy, we had to embark upon a major paradigm shift from return on investment to return on objective. Because to be clear, Lego Revenge of the Brick, that's the name. What we did was we did a twist off of the movie, which was Revenge of the Sith. So our movie was called Revenge of the Brick. This never would have happened if the client looked at traditional ROI measures. The reach on paper was subpar to a traditional youth TV schedule. The CPM of the program was outrageously high, and the program elements were unproven in an ad response model. There was no market mix model that we could use to sell this in. So how in the world did we pull it off? Well, we had a clear business objective. We had an insight-based engagement strategy to meet the objective. We had an opportunity to engage all key stakeholders in the program. We developed specific measures for the return on each program and objective, and we had a bit of faith in a big idea. So what I have on this slide, I'm not going to walk you through it, but you can hit pause and spend some time yourself so you can see literally how we created. Now, back in the day, I didn't have the language of jobs to be done, but you can get the sense that jobs to be done flowed through our thinking here. So the idea itself had to break through the clutter. The story content had to provide an opportunity for engagement among the Lego Star Wars enthusiast, and it had to create an opportunity for us to feature Lego Star Wars products. Then each phase of the media plan had very specific jobs and very specific KPIs. Phase 1 of the media plan was about solidifying retailer participation in the program. Phase 2 of the plan was all about delighting the enthusiasts and activating the marketplace at large. And phase 3 of the plan was promoting sales longevity, so kind of that repeat purchase and sustaining the engagement over time. And guess what? It worked. So as I wrap up this brief lecture, I want to leave you with a closing question. Why did it take an under-resourced situation to promote a media plan whose creativity supported robust metrics that move beyond exposure to action to ROI to create something meaningful that delivered on all of the comprehensive metrics that we wanted to do? I think we have some work to do, and that's helping to see that sometimes you don't have to spend your way out of a business challenge. That said, When you are handed resources from marketing finance, the first step in that challenge is right-sizing your objectives to your resources.